Hey budget gardeners, Vita Loca here. Join me today as we pot up some Alyssum seedlings. So let's go. I live in New Hampshire. I garden in USDA Zone 5B. Based on my zip code, my average last frost date is around May 15th. Today is April 4th, and I'm about 6 weeks away from my average last frost date. Alyssum, also known as Lobularia, is considered an annual here where I live in New Hampshire. It's a plant I've been growing from seed for a number of years, and in fact, it's a plant that I love to collect the seeds from. On March 8th, which was about 27 days ago, I made a video, and together we sowed a whole bunch of Alyssum seeds. If you missed that video, I'll add a link to that down in the description below. Once I had very good germination with my seedlings, I went ahead and I removed it from the seedling heat mat. I also took off the humidity dome at that time. The tray has continued to stay under my LED shop lights, which are on 16 hours a day. They come on at 5 a.m., they go off at 9 p.m. In order to avoid having leggy seedlings, I make sure that my LED shop lights are only about 2 to 3 inches above the seedlings. I've been bottom watering the seedlings, and the reason I do that is I don't want to introduce fungal issues such as damping off. At this time, my seedlings are also getting fertilizer because they have a couple of sets of leaves on them. Alyssum seeds are pretty small, and when we sowed the seeds, we sowed a couple of different varieties of Alyssum. The seedlings germinated pretty quickly, and whenever the time allowed, I was pricking seedlings out and potting them up into 6 cell packs. I have a lot of seedlings, and this is what the seedlings look like now, all potted up. I like to multi-sow a lot of my seeds in small restaurant takeout containers like this. The reason is I can fit a lot of seeds in this type of container, so it saves a lot of room up front under my grow lights. And then it's also a great way to check the viability of seeds. Only the viable seeds are going to germinate. And then as seedlings start emerging, I can go ahead and I can pot them up and I can place them in trays like the ones you see here. That just makes sure that I have a nice full tray of seedlings. Space under our grow lights is at a premium. It's very important to not have a whole bunch of cells that are empty. And that's why this method works for me. Today I'm going to show you my process for pricking out and potting up the Alyssum seedlings. I saved a few of them for us to do together. So far, I have pricked out almost all the seedlings, and the grand total right now is about 186 Alyssum plants. And it's pretty amazing that 186 plants came from one little container this big. The seeds were originally sown in seed starting mix. However, as I'm bumping up the seedlings, they are now being bumped up into potting mix. When it comes to potting mix, you can use whatever potting mix you feel comfortable with. I like to make my own potting mix because in the long run, I save a lot more money that way. And when I'm making measurements for my potting mix, I use what are called parts. Parts can be like a bowl, for example. So I use 4 parts of peat moss, although you can use cocoa coir. I like to buy it in a nice big bag in bulk from a local garden center. And then I add 1 part of perlite. Perlite is used to add good drainage to your potting mix, and I buy that in bulk on Amazon. Next, I add 1 part of vermiculite. Vermiculite helps retain moisture. I also buy a nice big bag of that in bulk on Amazon. And then I sprinkle the top with garden lime, the powder version of it, not the pelletized version. And the reason I add the lime is to offset the pH levels of the very acidic peat moss. If you are going to make your own potting mix and you're going to use cocoa coir, then you don't need to add any additional lime. When it comes time to pot up my seedlings, I like to pot them up in pre-moistened potting mix. And in order to pre-moisten the potting mix, I add boiling water to it. And I mix it all up, and then I cover it and I let it cool down. The reason I add boiling water is to kill off the chance of any fungus gnat eggs that might be in my peat moss. My small seedlings are going to be potted up into 6 cell packs. You can use whichever pot you feel comfortable with, and I like to add just 1 Alyssum seedling per cell. A few of you have asked me, is it possible to add a few seedlings per cell? Personally, I only like to add 1. However, it is totally okay. You can add 2 or 3 with the intention that you're eventually going to divide them and pot them up into their own cells. But with that said, I have never tried it where I've kept a couple of plants in a cell and then just kept them that way up until it's time to get them in the landscape. That might work with small plants like this that are the trailing variety. I've never done it that way, but experiment with it. It might work for you. And I totally get it. You might be running out of space and you're trying to find ways of saving space under your lights. So experiment and give it a try. For the most part, I want to say 99% of my Alyssum plants that you see here are all in their individual cells. There were a couple of seedlings when I was pricking them out that were super teeny tiny. Rather than giving them their own cell, I doubled them up and I had them share a cell with a larger plant. And I do intend to pull out those smaller seedlings and get them in their own cells at some point. The cell packs will get placed in a solid bottom 10 by 20 tray. And it's called that because it's 10 inches one way by 20 inches the other way. I love recycling and reusing a lot of things in the garden, including my pots and my trays. I get them from Facebook Marketplace, from friends and family that no longer need them. I also like to get them at a local garden center where they have a recycling bin. And then I also have a backyard plant nursery, and many times my customers will drop off pots and trays. Even though the quality of my pots and trays might not be the best, they do the job and it works for me. So let's go ahead and finish potting up the remaining alyssum seedlings.
When it comes to your potting mix, you want to make sure that it's not dripping wet. So when you squeeze it, there should be no water dripping from it. However, when you let go, it should hold its form, and that tells you it's the right consistency. Here's the 6 cell pack that we're going to use, and notice it has drainage holes in the bottom. That's very important. Whatever container or pot you use needs to have drainage holes in the bottom. Let's go ahead and add our potting mix to our 6 cell pack. It's very important that you fill up your 6 cell pack to the top. You want to press down, and the reason for that is you are trying to get rid of any air pockets that might be in there. If there are air pockets in there, that can cause a lot of issues, and one of the main issues is when it comes to bottom watering, you may not be able to fully bottom water a particular cell. Also, make sure that you're not pressing down too hard, because if you press down too hard and compress the soil, it's going to cause problems for proper root development.
I can't stress it enough. It's pretty amazing that we originally sowed all the seeds in this small little restaurant takeout container, and we ended up with all these seedlings. I do want to point out that there are seedlings at different stages of growth. The reason is when it came to pricking out the seedlings, I most likely pricked these ones out first. And then I eventually got to pricking out all of these ones. And so, yes, they're smaller, but that's only because these just got pricked out within the last day. Whereas the ones that you see that are bigger over here were pricked out probably 2 weeks ago. These seedlings will take off in no time. I still have plenty of time before my average last frost date. Always add labels when potting up seedlings, especially if you're potting up different colors or different varieties of the same kind of plant. I'm just going to use a pen to make holes inside of my 6 cell pack, and I want to make sure that I'm making the holes deep enough to accommodate the root size of the plant. This leaf down here, that was the first leaf to appear when the seedling germinated. At that point, the plant doesn't need any fertilizer. It has everything that it needs stored inside of the seed as well as that first leaf that appeared. After that, additional leaves appeared, and these are called the true leaves. When any plant has what are called the true leaves, at that point you want to start giving your seedling fertilizer, and you want to give it at a half a strength fertilizer. For my flower seedlings, I use a half a strength of Miracle Grow. You can use whatever fertilizer you like, just make sure you're doing a half a strength because the plants are still very small. Once the plants are much larger, then at that point you can go ahead and start giving a full strength of fertilizer. I'm just going to use my pen and I'm going to go below the soil level and gently tug and pull the seedling out. You want to always hold the seedling by its leaves. You never want to pull a seedling by the stem. If you pull the seedling by the stem and the stem breaks, then the plant is basically gone and it's not going to grow. However, if you pull any seedling by its leaf and one leaf breaks, there are still plenty of other leaves here and the plant should recover and be fine. The plants basically need the leaves in order to photosynthesize and continue growing. So I'm just going to get under and I'm pulling the seedling at the same time very gently. And you can see the seedling has a nice good root system going on for it. And this is what I was talking about. When it comes to making the hole in each of the cells, I want to make sure that the hole is deep enough to accommodate part of the stem as well as the roots. I will be burying the stem under the soil level. You can do that with certain plants, including alyssum, and that just makes it so that it's a sturdier, stronger plant. The leaves need to be above soil level. I'm just guiding the roots in there. And again, I want to make sure that the stem is also buried. It just helps the plant so that it's not so tall and leggy and falling over. If I want to, I can use the back of the pen also, just to push down the potting mix around the base of my seedling. And that's what it looks like when you look at it from the side. Again, notice that the stem has been buried, but the leaves are still above soil level. And if I wanted to, I could come under here and just pull out all of these, just like this. And that's okay at this point because today I am planning on potting up the rest of what's in this tray. And then I can easily be able to just tug my seedlings apart while still handling them just by their leaves. Timing is everything when it comes to our seedlings. Last year, or maybe it was the year before, I can't remember, I definitely started these too early and they were blooming, but then they almost went past their prime by the time it was time to put them out in the landscape. So that's why this year I decided to sow my seeds a little bit later. In fact, many times I'll list some self seeds in my yard, and I end up with beautiful flowers, even the ones that self seed. So these will take off, and I'll still have plenty of beautiful flowers in 6 weeks when it's time to get them out in the landscape. I did bottom water these, and that's also important. When you're going to be potting up seedlings, you want to make sure that they've been watered the day or the night before. If I was to put a few seedlings in each cell, what I would probably do is I would have made two holes. I would have made a hole in this corner and in this corner, for example. And that way the seedlings still have room between them. And if that is something that you want to do with a plant like Alyssum or even trailing lobelia, you could try that. But just know that as those two plants start getting larger, that just means you're going to have more roots inside of your cell and the plants just won't grow to their maximum potential. But if you're running out of room, that's definitely an option. I definitely had some seedlings that died along the way, like this one here, this one here. And that just happens sometimes when the soil dried out in between. And that's one of the reasons why I like to sow so many seeds because of situations like that. It's inevitable, it's going to happen. I've had the question before about why do I grow so many plants? Well, I like the plants in my yard to be heavily packed. I don't know if you've ever been to Epcot in Disney World. I want my flower beds to sometimes look like that. I think it would look just so nice to have a ton of color. Also, I have a backyard plant nursery, and there's been a lot of interest in people wanting to buy the plants that I start from seed. So why not, right? I might as well grow for myself and grow some to sell as part of my nursery. Tuck these little guys in. They're just going to be so much happier. And not only that, it just is a lot easier for me to water these now that they're in the 6 cell packs. When I sowed the alyssum seeds, I had promised that I would give you an update when it came time to potting up the seedlings. And that's why I'm making these kind of videos, just to show you at a very high level my process for potting up the seedlings, even if we're only just potting up a 6 cell pack together. At least now you've seen my process for doing that. And then I do a whole bunch more 6 cell packs of the same plant off camera. These trays will continue being under my grow lights. Again, the grow lights are just a few inches above the trays. The lights are on 16 hours a day. When it comes to watering, I'll be bottom watering. And if you want to know any more about my grow light systems, I did make a video and I can put a link to that down in the description. My grow room has an oscillating fan and the fan is on the same time that the lights are on, so 16 hours a day. The fan adds movement and that's really good for nice, strong, healthy plants. It mimics what the plants are going to feel when they get hardened off and get placed outside. Also, it dries off the surface of the soil just a little bit, and that's good because no plant likes it overly wet. So basically, you're making stronger, healthier plants by having a fan in your grow room. Let me know if you're growing alyssum, either from seed or from plants that you bought. Which variety are you growing, and how are your plants doing? I'll make update videos when it's time to pot up the seedlings, to pinch them back so that the plants are bushier, when it comes time to harden them off and then get the plants out in the landscape. And until the next video, make it a great day with gardening.